Hello, and welcome to Seeking Heaven, the Near-Death Experience and Other Phenomena. I'm your host, six-time near-death experiencer, Tamara Calder Richardson, as well as afterlife speaker, evidential medium, and Christ channeler. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, subscribe, hit the little bell so you get all the alerts. I have 2 shows a week, as well as I have near-death experience guests, people that have had spiritually transformative experiences. We go over mystical topics, as well as fairies, star seeds, Pleiadians, and it's so much fun. And Bigfoot. I mean, we just have a blast. So sign up below, and also consider being a member. With the membership, it starts at $2.99. It supports the channel. And you can also become a love leader for only $24.99, which you get me for 2 hours a month in spiritual coaching and lessons with a small group. So consider that. So thank you for watching, and like and make comments. Now, let me tell you about today's guest. I've been very excited about today's guest. They are a trailblazer in terms of the near-death experience, this whole arena, this topic. And let me tell you a little bit about them before I bring them on. This person works, the specialty would be, this would be Brother Ed Salisbury. He is a end-of-life care specialist he's a hospice minister, as well as a funeral director, yoga coach. He is a trip. He is so full of wisdom, but so much fun. And his life is just amazing. And like I said, his stories are fascinating, and there's so much wisdom he has to share. So what I like best about him is he is a Southern boy. So I'm going to bring him on right now. He's a good old Southern boy. So welcome, Brother Ed. This is Ed Salisbury.
Namaste and howdy, y'all. What a pleasure and delight to be with each and all of y'all. I trust that we are united in a higher calling, and I am here at your service. Thank you, Tamara.
Oh, God bless you. I mean, I feel so blessed to have you on. And then after this interview, and a week from now, you'll see the premiere of your partner, which is Dr. Cheryl Mackin, and amazing too. They're both 3-time near-death experiencers. So, and then you're going to see the live chat with them together, which they're a hoot, and they're just amazing and fun and full of life and full of so much knowledge. So I know we're going to have a blast today because we always do. Now, I met Ed and Cheryl. I met you all, I guess was it 5 years ago at the IONS Colorado conference? Is it that long ago?
As I recall, that's where we first connected in the physical plane.
And it was several of us in the lobby at this really fancy hotel we were staying at where they're having the conference. And we're in the lobby, and it was so cute because you had brought snacks for everybody, and which saved a lot of money. But they had snacks because it was a very fancy hotel. And you brought out these snacks. You were feeding everybody. We had drinks, and we sat, I think it was in the lobby for 3 hours or longer, talking about near-death experience stories. And I thought, my God, these two are remarkable. So I'm so grateful to have them both on. So where do we start with you, Ed? My gosh, you have done so many things, and you really are a renegade in the near-death experience community, and have spoken at quite a few afterlife conferences, including IONS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies. So you've had 3 NDEs, but you've had a lot of spiritually transformative experiences too, and the journey of your life. So I can't put boundaries on you. I'm just going to let you go for it. Just start telling everybody about you. There's so much there.
I'd like to simplify where I can, and that is that I am simply a small town, coastal Texas country Boy Scout, altar boy who has experienced life's excitement and challenges in the military, in college, in corporate America, and in seeking the higher truths that come when we are transformed by the gifts from heaven. Now, some people are able to find that gift by simply being still and allowing it to embed them. Some people like you and I, sometimes we have to be taken to the brink of physical reality. And my original near-death experience that transformed me took place way back in December 1969. At 26 years of age, I had, like I said, finished college, and I was a corporate golden boy, installing and bringing technology to different departments of the Coca-Cola Corporation in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
And in retrospect, looking back, I was driving around with my top down and my Firebird convertible, thinking I was God's gift to women, and I was blessed to be a white boy who had everything I could ever want for. Going home on December 30th, after working at Coca-Cola, I went across the street, football game with friends, and driving home in a winding street on Buckhead area of North Atlanta, I had a car coming at me. And as it was aiming right at me, I went over to the side and my wheel hit the curb. And the next thing I know, there was a sudden bang. Have you ever been hit behind on a swinging door or something like a tire blowing out on a car going down the highway? I was stunned and shocked when this happened. Literally, my car crashed into a tree. I ended up being scalped, crushed my skull, broke my chin off, steering wheel flattened my chest against my backbone. And later on, they found out I also ruptured my intestines.
Dear God, were you cognizant all this was going on, or were you knocked out?
Well, I'll tell you where I was, but this is what happened to my body.
Okay.
In this case, and this is something I learned more after I reviewed the ambulance report and the doctor's programs that I had later on in recovery. But actually, I was delivered to Grady Memorial Hospital, described as a lifeless, bloody bag of broken bones. And the hand of God was able to take me away from that painful experience, because that bam, when I hit the tree, just knocked me for a stun. And when I tried to straighten and clear my eyes, I was looking down as if I'm a second story down at this vehicle, crashed into the tree. And I looked at it and I said, goodness, that looks like my car. What's happening here? And as I focused in, there's this body slumped over the steering wheel, flames and smoke coming out of the hood, people rushing out of the house. And I'm thinking, Lord, if that's my body, then who am I? And for the first time up until that point in my life, I thought my body was my absolute extent of my being. But in the next moment, when I had this question clarified that I'm not that, who am I? I found myself going into what looked like a vortex. And I use the analogy of a piece of dust going up in a vacuum hose, because I found myself spiraling up into the sky and into the stars.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you a couple things, because I'm like so curious. So when you had that impact, did you feel it, or did you just pop right out?
It was sudden and profound and instantaneous.
Okay, so you popped out.
I was there and then bam, I'm not.
You're out. Because this comes through a lot in readings where people go, no, I didn't feel pain. It's like they pop out and they're in another reality. So when you're going through this vortex, was it like what some people say, a tunnel, or what did it look like?
In finding words to describe this phenomenon, we struggle to be as accurate as we can, but that can only be it's like I can show you a black and white picture. I can't give you a full color picture of the experience, because human concepts and words cannot completely and accurately convey the beauty and the phenomena, the grace and the glory that is being in that place beyond. As I travel through this starry heaven, I asked myself, where am I? And pretty soon I found myself going from the dark tunnel into this wonderful, euphoric white light. If you've ever been in a dark movie theater in the middle of the day and you walk out into the sun, you feel the whole thing like a wet blanket landing on you. But walking into this or arriving into this white light, it's, if you've ever been out in working in a cold rain for hours on end, soaked to the bone, and can't wait until you finally get home and you sink into a nice hot bathtub.
Yes.
Imagine that,
Yes.
into this white light is like that, of a soaking, euphoric, embracing, nurturing warmth. It's more than a physical warmth. It's more than, it's a total, and I have to quote my sweetheart, what talks about is better than a multitude of euphoric orgasms. That only approximates this glory that comes with being immersed in our white light. And white light has been a essential element in most all of the near-death experiences that I have heard about or shared with others. And after a while, I was loving this, and I started questioning about, well, why am I here? What am I doing? And pretty soon, the images started to clarify. And it used to be where you would have what we call a Polaroid camera, where you take a picture and you could watch the picture go from nothing fuzzy to a clear image. Well, I found myself in this enormous, almost Coliseum dorm of records. And it was like books in Library of Congress that I loved walking into the chamber, and there were layers and layers of books. But for me, it was layers and layers of images, of answers, of anything I asked, like, why was I born in the family I was? Okay. And the answers came clearer, quicker than this was, the kind of Google search long before we had that technology.
This some guy Google search.
Yes, exactly. Ask and it will be shown. So offer, and so I had, why was Jesus crucified? Why do I have trouble in my relationships with my sister? Or any of these things. Whatever question I had, the answer was there. And I dwelled there for, I can't tell you how long, because time no longer constraining. But it answered every question I had. And remember, now I had just finished having a college degree in physics and logic. And I had been in Naval Air Intelligence trying to figure out, knowing who's doing what, where are the secrets. There were no secrets in heaven. And after answering and saturating all my thoughts, I think, okay, then why am I here? And in that moment, this image began to solidify in front of me. And there was the image I had carried with me growing up and being an altar boy of Jesus on the cross, but he wasn't on the cross. He was there stretched out, praising things. And as I recognized who was there, brought his arms out to me, and I literally floated right into his embrace. And as I was drinking in the love in his eyes, I said, I can't believe I'm here. And he conveyed, I am always with you, always have been and always will be. You are my true child of love. And then with his left hand, he's pointing out to this figure and wanting me to look. But I didn't want to turn away from this beautiful gaze, this loving smile, and this saturating ecstasy.
Yeah.
But it was a loving command, so I turned where he was pointing, and there, sitting on a throne, was this grandfather-like Godfather, Father God himself. And this figure, God, sitting there, reaches out with one hand and says, "Come." With the other hand, he's patting on his lap. For the first time in this experience, I became self-conscious. Up until then, I'm so absorbed into what's coming to me, or I'm immersed in. I stop with, like, "You want me?" And I think of children waiting to sit in Santa's lap, and when it's their time, it's like, whoa. In fact, one of the people who's written my story up says, "God beckoned and I backed away." And in truth, I doubted that you can't mean me. But in the next instant, bam, I'm there in his lap with him looking down into my eyes, showering me with so much love, so much joy, so much grace. It was, again, 1,000 times greater than Jesus's embrace. Take a moment, if you would, just to kind of close your eyes and imagine how you would feel sitting with arms in the lap of God, with arms around you, showering you with joy, bliss, and love.
Beautiful.
And I look up in his eyes and I say, "I can't believe I'm here." And the answer came flowing back, "You're always here. If you could only remember this.
Wow.
I'm always with you. You are always in my care."
Wow.
And I said, "Really?" And it was like, yes, you are always here and always will be. Now, he says, "Are you through?" And he's pointing down at my feet, his feet. And as I, again, don't want to look away from his loving gaze, but it was a loving command. So I turn and I look down at his feet, and there scattered about was images. If you've ever opened up an old photo album that fell out of your hands and pictures scattered around on the floor,
Okay.
here's this image of all these pictures at his feet. And they were not just pictures, they were total memories of my life.
So it was your version of a life review?
It was my version, my experience of a life
Wow.
review.
How
It
sweet.
took a moment, and there was all of these messages. And so I stopped, and there I looked down, and there was this memory of when I was a young man living in Panama Canal Zone. And back then, you could get money for selling the Coke bottles back to the store, and I was stealing Coke bottles. And again, this must be, I was 7 or 10, I can't remember exactly, but I relived the entire experience of trying to get these bottles and put them under my arm, and quietly as possible sneaking down the alley.
Wow.
Remembering as I got to the end of the alley, I said to myself, "Thank God nobody caught me." And then I thought, whoa, oh, you were there, weren't you?
So something that seemingly insignificant, really? Wow.
Tamara, every pride and shame, every secret, and every element that has an emotional attachment to it is deeply recorded on our being. And I was so embarrassed. And God, I'm terrible. I was a bad boy. And the response was this. He says, I said, that was terrible. I was bad. And he looks at me and he looks at this image and he looks back and he says, well, it's neither good nor bad in the greater sense. It's a lesson for the learning. Are you through? And I struggle with what? I thought there was this judgmental God and punishment and all of that. And he says, my love is unconditional. Are you through?
Mhm.
And I struggled. I don't know how long I dwelled in that position or posture trying to absorb the profound truth of this. As I turn back and I look at times when I lied, or times when I helped other neighbors, and times when I was good, and times when I was bad. And one that really stands out is the time I was teasing a young girl in front of me, and this was the fifth grade. I was a fat asthmatic kid
Are you
who could
really?
barely keep up with the guys trying to be, in football, junior high, they made me, one of the tackles because I could just run forward and fall on people. I couldn't run up with anybody. So I wanted to be part of the gang and one of the leaders in the strong boys. So I leaned forward to this girl who spoke with a lisp in front of me. And I teasingly says, aren't you foul and sorry you have such difficulty? And I looked back to my friends trying to make sure they saw that I was as rude and mean as they were.
Oh, wow. When you mocked
And
her.
not only did I recall that, then I instantaneously got to feel how I had made her feel.
Oh,
I felt how she was crushed and how I was so cruel and mean. And I thought, oh my Lord, God, that is really terrible. I'm so bad. The response was again, I love you and always will. It's neither good nor bad in the greater sense. It's a lesson for the learning. Are you through? And I was like, whoa. And then there was this occasion when in high school I was at the beach and this girl was drowning. I went out. I brought her back in. I did CPR. She coughed up water and sand in my face, but finally friends came patting me because I brought her back to life. And I recall getting up and walking down the beach, taking in the sun, thinking to myself, man, I ought to get another merit badge if I just wasn't playing hooky. But I turned to God with, well, this was a good one, wasn't it?
yeah, it's a real good one.
Do I get credit for that? And he kind of winked and giggled and he says, son, I love you unconditionally. Are you through? So, Tamara, I went through and relived all of the things I never wanted anyone to know, or things where I was inappropriately or caught up and egotistically thinking I was a leader. As it came down, I had relived everything I had done down to the time the day before my experience. I had turned in an expense account where I cheated even on that, saying, well, I work 60, 80 hours a week and only get paid for 40, so I deserve more. So I
Really?
lied on my expense account. And there I was looking at God with, I really do this, don't I? And again,
Oh,
are
wow.
you through? I love you always and always will. And as I took all that in and looked up at him, I just thought to myself, said, there's no way I want to leave here. I just want to close that book there. I just want to make sure mom knows I'm okay. And I no sooner had this thought and reached down to close the book on my life than I came to 2 weeks later out of a coma with my mother at the foot of the bed.
Wow. The timing of it all. Wow, that you open up and at the same time. Wow. So let me ask you this. What about, it's interesting your life review, and it was every little thing you thought would never be known was known. What about when we ask, or people, because I can hear now some of the questions that we'll get on this, but when people say, well, God forgive me for that. I mean, do you still have to go through it, right? You still have to experience it.
There are consequences. There are consequences for everything we think, we say, and we do. And it's taken me almost a lifetime to realize, choose the good ones, refrain from the bad ones. If it's not a loving expression, don't use your energy for less than loving service to others.
Yes, because you'll have to re-experience it again. It will be unpleasant.
Uh-huh.
So, oh, wow. But the love, I mean, there's something to be said about all that love that you experienced, despite that you might have made some bad decisions that was painful to re-experience, that God loved you regardless.
Now you have to understand this was 1969, 1970. And it took a while in recovery from that damage to my body. In fact, over the following 5 years, I had 7 major surgeries putting me back together in pieces and parts.
What, your face? Was it your face injury?
Well, wiring up my jaw it really was
Ooh.
the crushed chest and ruptured intestines. According to the doctors, they had finally brought me back to life in the emergency room, sent me into the operating room, kept putting me on life support. And after a few days, they said, well, we've got the lungs working, we've got the brain, things functioning, but he's still losing blood. And they finally said, well, and they realized, the intestines. So they opened me up and found out my intestines had ruptured in multiple places, and they had to remove about a third of my lower intestines before they sewed me back up.
Wow, it just kept going on. Got it. So 5 years. You were, when this happened, you were what, in your 20s? So with all the surgeries, you didn't get to have a normal young life.
I would get put back together, and I would think I'm okay, and with the magic of enough drugs and medicine, I went back and I married the woman I was ready to propose to before the accident happened.
Okay.
And so I married the love of my life, Gloria. Gloria was a school teacher and just a bright and enchanting woman. And so I married Gloria, and in and out of the hospital again, we finally went back to grad school. And I went back to the University of Texas, and she went on to do her doctorate work while I was in the business school. Then I was disillusioned with that. I went into the law school, and I got disillusioned there. And then I went over to the seminary, and they asked me to find another place because I didn't fit in.
What? You're a minister now, and you're a great minister. I mean, you're so inspirational. Oh my goodness.
At the time I was coming back to saying, looking for answers, and I was finally led to the Edgar Cayce program at the Mystic School.
Yeah. Oh yes, I was studying him at an early age. Yes.
And actually had the good fortune of, in Austin, Texas at the time, was another sleeping psychic like Cayce named Ray Stanford, and I got involved with him. My wife and I helped start the Association for the Understanding of Man. And we did a lot of studies and conferences and symposiums in that organization. I had successes in real estate and others and wanted to adopt kids because my surgeries wouldn't enable us to have kids. And so we went off. I finally said I had to have a valid job in order to be eligible to adopt children. So I went and found a job in Houston, Texas, where family had been. And I was a network nerd selling computer connection technology to the oil industry and the space program way back in the 70s.
Wow.
And so I was on top of the world. We had a home and things were working well. But I got caught up and I was spending so much time on computers. Gloria said, "You promised to take me sailing, and it's been months now. You said on Labor Day, and it's almost Halloween." So I borrowed my sister's sailboat and we went camped out on the shore of Corpus Christi, Texas. We sailed down to the city and on our sailing back on the 21-foot Lido yawl. This is a day sailor. We had a Labrador dog with us. We took turns, one of us on the tiller and the other one sitting up forward. And I was lying in the bow, looking up at the stars, watching satellites come through the sky with my dog in my arm, thinking how glorious this can be. Only to feel the wind come shifting. And in sailing, if the wind goes through the nose of the ship, it's called a tack. If the wind goes through the back of the ship, it's called a jibe. In a jibe, the wind suddenly swings the boom across the back of the boat. I felt the boom starting to swing and I screamed, "Gloria!" just as she stood up and the boom hit her on the head and knocked her in the water.
Dear God.
I was unable to bring her back to the surface. I struggled. I was able to grab a hold of her, but I couldn't bring her. She was dead weight. I came to the surface and I screamed, "To hell with you, God." Literally, I said, "F you. It should have been me." And I was numb. And I can still remember only parts of the funeral arrangement and all of those sort of things.
I can only imagine.
And I struggled. And it wasn't much later that I went to visit my cousins who at the time were living in California, in San Francisco. In fact, they had a very nice home in Tiburon, which is on the northern shores of San Francisco, across the Golden Gate Bridge. Mm-hmm. They had this beautiful home, and so in this particular occasion, it was probably a 2 or 3 day festival where they kept saying, "Oh, y'all come down to our house and meet our cousin Eddie. Poor Eddie, lost his wife. We're here to cheer him up." And I think it was, I'd gotten weary with all of the people coming and going. Sure. I was still in a bathing suit because we'd been bathing that afternoon, and this was California, and you dry off in the sun and enjoy the fruit hanging off the plants. Well, everyone was having all this, eating and drinking and having fun, and I was just had enough, so I went back down to this swimming pool that had one of these slides that came down into the water. And I'd been enjoying sliding down that slide into the pool most of the day. Well, I sat up on the top of the slide with my feet on the ladders, and I repeated to myself the prayer of burial at sea that had taught me in the Navy. And I offered myself up to Spirit, and I said, "Accept this, oh Lord." And I laid back and I let go, and as I started sliding down the slide, I came off the end of the ramp. In a moment, I stopped with the thought, did they let the water out? I turned to look, and my head hit the water and snapped. and I sank to the bottom.
Now, wait up. Okay. There was no water in there? I'm confused.
The pool was still full. It was
It
just
was.
my mind had wondered, did I do this wrong? And as soon as I hit the water, it was like again that stunning as if when I hit the tree in my first near-death experience. Well, it wasn't much later than I was looking down and I was seeing my body in the pool itself. And then I started lifting a little higher, and I could see the house and the cars in front. And pretty soon I was floating higher and higher where I could see the shape of the San Francisco Bay and the curvature of the planet. Much as we often see these days of what a rocket will see as it flies away from the Earth.
Yes.
Well, this was back early 1970, and I was watching my body and this Earth float away from me.
Wow.
I backed my way into heaven. I went back and I turned and I was back in that white light again. And I'm here. In a few moments, minutes, a few days, again, time no longer relevant. It ceases to be what it is in this physical dimension. But I was in the white light enjoying it, and then this image came together, much as you watch Transporter in Star Trek.
Yes.
You see these pieces of light.
Yeah, where they come right.
Right, and there it manifests in front of me. My dad's dad, my granddad. Just as he did the day as I was a young boy and he got off the train in Houston coming to visit us from New England where he lived. And there was my granddad, and he says, "Eddie, my boy," and I just float into him, and he hugs me. Grandpa, I have missed you so. And then he takes me back, and he looks into my eyes, and he says, "Now, I want you to give your father a message." And I think, oh, you want me to tell Dad? He thinks I'm a loony already. Did you
I was going
talk to
to
him?
say, right, he's going to listen to me, huh?
He says, "I want you to tell Sheldon, quit taking life so seriously." Now, my dad, and I'm number one son, and he was Navy officer, almost up for admiral. He was a captain when and so it was yes sir, no sir, aye yes sir, right away sir. But he told me that was a message, and I says, "Okay, Grandpa, I'll do it." And so he turned me and let me go, and all of a sudden, up on in the distance, like a doorway here, there was the image of my wife, Gloria, in all of the beauty and glory and love. It was the day I married her in her beautiful wedding dress.
Oh, my goodness.
And she was there, and I was like, "Gloria, Gloria, I'm so sorry." And I felt like I was teleported. I ran to her, and she embraced me. And I started wailing and crying and sobbing and telling her how sorry I was and how angry at God I am and how it was my fault and I wish it were different. And I would plead with her, and she held me like we do a baby who is doing a tantrum almost. She held me while I went through all of my wailing and screaming and arguing and pleading. And she says, "Listen, I am where I'm meant to be. You've got to set me free. Your grief, your anger holds me back, holds us both back. You've got to let me go." And so it was like, and again, I would, but can't you understand? I'm going to stay here. I don't need to go back. I don't want to go back. And she says, "That's not your choice."
Whoa.
But then she takes me and her arm wraps me around, and with her arm over my back, she points down at this body in the pool, and she says, "Is that any way to leave your family?" And I look at my body down there, and I look at her, and I look back down at her, at that body, and I say, "Dang, I hate it when you're right." And in that next instant, some force pushed me over the edge of the pool as I'm coughing up blood and water, and
Oh,
my cousins are coming out of the patio door hollering, "Eddie, Eddie, where are you? What's happened?" And they pick me up, and I'm kind of, "Oh, yeah, yeah," and they wrap me up in the bed, and I slept for almost 3 days.
really?
Yeah.
Wow. So what do you think really, when you came off that slide, what happened? I mean, did you will yourself to cross over?
That's a question I'm not sure I have an answer for.
I mean, I'm not, yeah, maybe you don't.
It is part of the ebb and flow of life's opportunities.
Right.
I had an opportunity to uh, be still and know and accept. Well, again, here I am in my late 20s, thinking I can manage things and I'll put it back together. And I'm a systems analyst now. I know how to make things work. I can design my future and get a handle on things, only to realize that there are forces, ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful that my life took me into naval experiences, because being a Virgo, I'm good with logic. Being a Pisces, I love the flow and the movement. And to ride the waves, to learn that even when I have control of my ship, and I did the ocean racing for the Naval Academy, racing from
Interesting.
Chesapeake Bay all the way up to Massachusetts, riding out in the ocean when the storms hit. It doesn't matter how you aim the boat, wind and tide is going to take its force. In the same way, spirit and destiny have forces upon us. And it's our challenge, as well as our choices, to choose the right way to respond to those forces and realize that we are loved unconditionally and given the freedom to choose each thought and action that we do.
Yes. And can I ask you this too? What is your thoughts on um, exit points? And do you think that
Mm.
was a possible exit point? Did you? But then it said you didn't have a choice. So it's like, you hear some near-death experiences that they get a choice. I didn't have a
Mhm.
choice in mine.
Mhm.
I wasn't given a choice. So with you, you were told basically to go back, but it also made you think. So what do you think that was all about? Do you think it was to give you closure?
It was to transform how I related to an experience that I was powerless to control.
Wow.
Her
Yeah.
her drowning was beyond my control,
Yeah.
and all of my grief, anger, and expectations making it different cannot change the ebb and flow, the tide of grace and difficulty that comes our way.
Yes, that's life, isn't it? These are some of the more challenging moments of life when you love
Mhm.
someone so deeply and you can't control it. Yes. So
Well, this drowning takes me to the third NDE. But ask your question, please.
no, I was just going to say, whatever happened with how much longer did you stay in California and what happened next? So no, this is perfect. Go ahead.
Yeah, I still had my home in Houston, Texas, and by this time, I wasn't. I'd left my job. I should digress for a moment. In fact, we had, when I was in grad school working in real estate, and then Gloria's auntie had died and left an inheritance. So I had a bank full of money, but a house that was empty. And I went home struggling, where do I go? What should I do with all of this? And becoming active in spiritual seeking, becoming very intimately involved in the Unity Church of Christianity. I was no longer comfortable with the rigid structure of the Episcopal or the Catholic or any of the others, but the open, loving formats of Unity Church of Christianity was one that I was very much at home in. In fact, Gloria and I had been youth ministers in the church when we were there in Houston, helped build the pyramid that still stands at Unity in Houston.
Okay.
Back home, struggling with what to do and finding this aching pain inside my body and doing all I could to manage the pain of this in my lungs. I finally found out that I had a collapsed left lobe of the lung. In other words, in reflection, I hung on to my grief, trying to avoid letting anyone see me cry or talk about the pain and anger. I held on to it, I held it in, and I ended up with a collapsed lung and had to go in for another surgery.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so I was wheeled into, by this time, this is the 7th time that I was being wheeled in on a cart. And some of your listeners, I'm sure, those of us who've had multiple journeys down the hallway into the OR, when they say count down from 100, and then you disappear and you blank out. And then you come back into a body that's been carved up and changed.
Oof,
I
yes. found
found myself being, the pre-op, they had pretty well numbed me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was lying on the table, and the surgeons were, saying, well, we know what we need to do. By this time, I had been a rather difficult patient because I had had so many visits to hospitals that I found the surgeon wanted to take out my whole left lower lobe of my lungs. And I said, well, do we have to do that? And I ended up finding an old TB doctor who said, in the old days, we just carved out the bad part. So I insisted the surgeon have this old TB doctor in the operating room with him.
Oh, good.
In fact, there they were, and they were ready to put me to sleep. But as they were putting the breathing tube down my throat with the gas mask trying to put me to sleep, I was so numb I couldn't move anything, not except my eyes. I couldn't react. I couldn't respond. I was totally made
paralyzed.
Yeah. And here they were trying to cram this thing through the scar tissue from the trachea first. And I found myself.
Oh.
And then I found myself pop out of my body. And then I found myself on the ceiling, watch them as they picked me up, twisted me over, sawed open a rib.
Oh my gosh. So you saw the whole thing.
I got to witness. And so I'm witnessing this. And somehow in my interaction with my body and all of this bloody gore, I'm thinking, well, now, by now I'd been studying mystic teachings and the ideas of karma and consequences and so forth. And I'm looking deeply at this and wondering, well, what is the lesson here? And in the next instant, I'm looking at this being who's looking at my body. And it's like, if you can remember a time when you put on a costume and you look through the mirror to see what do I look like in that. And so I'm looking at this being, and this being's looking back, and it's me in a previous incarnation.
That is super cool. Wow.
I not only got to see who I was, I had a life recall of being one of Hannibal's swordsmen who was so good at sword fighting that I would disembowel my opponents. Just first, I knew how to slice the tendons at their feet so they couldn't go anywhere. Then I knew how to just,
It all came back.
and there I was
Wow.
watching me disembowel others and watching someone disembowel me.
Wow, that's heavy.
And to this day, I still have the deep scar here. But there was this, aha, there is the verification for me that as you sow, so shall you reap. And then I said, okay,
Oh, dear goodness.
I
Karma.
got it. And as soon as I had
Whoa.
the aha, I get it. That's real. That's true. Then I watched the surgeon throw the sheet over my body. And he and the anesthesiologist started to walk out the door. And I heard the surgeon say to the anesthesiologist, "You really effed that one up."
Mm.
And the anesthesiologist turned, "I'll be GD if I'm going to take the blame for this one. It's your fault this time." And no
Really?
sooner did they say that than my body jerked. They turned to each other, "Oh, he's back." And they jumped in and I faded out.
So,
Came
and that
2 days
point you came back.
2 days later, I came to, in recovery room.
So,
That
okay.
was my third, and I think, I would call it the Holy Trinity, if you would, of my NDEs.
That's funny. A Holy Trinity. Well, that last one. So when you asked about karma and this, and then got to see you as a different person, look at then you saw the connection. That's amazing. But then you got to, um, you know, when they covered you up, I actually remember that with my one that I was dead for a long time, the one I
Mhm.
hung out in the coma with Jesus, and honestly, that last bit, I don't know why it was upsetting, but they covered me up, and walked away, but then I came back. So to
Mhm.
me, I think this kind of thing must happen a lot, but they're probably afraid. Just as a comment from one NDEr to another, the doctors, the anesthesiologists, whoever it is that's in there, they're probably afraid of getting blame. And so when the person goes, the electrical surge goes through that person and they wake up and there's a pulse and there's a breath that God puts in them, they're like, ooh, okay, let's don't tell anybody, because they're not legally bound to tell anybody, right? They're just glad they're back. I bet you this happens a lot.
It amazes me that it wasn't until uh, decades later, in sharing my experiences in a Payan's gathering, that one woman in the audience said, "I was there. I remember you. I
No way.
remember." She was a
No
scrub
way.
nurse in that experience decades earlier. And to
No.
get validation is such a precious gift.
Really? So it was just a coincidence. She was there and she was at that time and remembers you, so that she add anything to it to say, yeah, that did happen. They did cover you up. Did she say all that?
Um,
Wow.
she, in essence, just said, she had her perspective on it, and I was one of those rare birds that came back when they thought for sure I was gone.
Well, God wasn't done with you. That's how it works. Surprise.
You
Oh
know, as we share our experiences with one another, as we open up our minds and tell our truths to others who are struggling to put together um, the challenges, the disappointments, the pains and ironies and agonies of life. I go back to the original God's message. It's neither good nor bad in the greater sense. It's a lesson for your learning. And underlying that is love one another,
yeah.
serve one another, and
Yeah.
you shall receive the joy in the grace of heaven.
It's beautiful.
Are you through? Apparently I'm not. I'm still here doing what I
No,
can.
you're not through. And you're also you're a tough cookie, but it's interesting that, I always look at you know different people, and like with me, you were talking about how you were hard-headed, you were young, you could do this and that, but God knew in your heart that you could be impressionable and change. It's amazing how that is that way. I feel like I've had so many lives within just this one life, and the more I know, the more I go, what do I really know? The more I know, it's like, what do I know? The question that I get a lot from people watching is, okay, so how many times do we need to come back? How many lessons do we need to learn? How many so and so? And that's a tough one because I do know that we learn from every perspective, from what they saw, from what another one saw, from what we saw, and then
Yeah.
we become the person that's working on someone, the person that's the killer, the victim. And so this cycle, I know creation can't stop and learning can't stop, but I keep being asked about this cycle, about the learning. I mean, I really can't say there's an end to it.
Rather than endings, I see it as an evolving experience
Yeah, it is
of
evolving.
creating, and many my teachers have pointed out that we were and are, and if I can put this right now, you and I are unique, precious, and powerful, immortal beings having a temporary experience in a physical dimension of time and space,
Yes.
with an opportunity to use the gift of our individuality to bring about the Garden of Eden in this dimension and for future incarnations to come.
Yes, and I believe that too. And I wanted to ask you, which ties back into when you were I believe it was the first NDE, when you were in the arms of God, and and I loved how God appeared to you like a precious, like a grandfather type, very, very loving, and said, we're never separated, we're always together, we're always this one. Have you forgotten? So isn't it really us remembering that we are from these higher states, and this is just an experience we're going through? And some may call it an illusion or a holographic illusion. It's an experience, but it feels very real when pain's involved. Pulls you back
Mhm.
into the body pretty quick. Sometimes it'll pop you out.
Mhm.
But then you think, how many of these lifetimes, how many different planets, how many different versions of us? This is really complex, but isn't it to pure mind is back to love again, to understand how to love one another?
There is a power. We call it maybe the force. We call it maybe the grace of God. There is this essential element called love that seems to be the essence of what has manifested in form with shape and time and place. And yet it's immortal as well as temporal. And I'll have to refer some of our followers, some of my favorite descriptions I find in the works of Emanuel Swedenborg.
Oh, I love his work. I have his
Swedenborg is a
book.
brilliant,
Yeah.
uh, I consider him as sort of like a cross between Benjamin Franklin and Billy Graham.
Oh, that is so funny. That is so true because he was an industrialist, a Swedish industrialist, and he wanted to know about this Christianity. There's got to be more to it. And boy, did he find.
His book, Life Between Death and Rebirth, so beautifully expressed my experiences that I struggle finding words to describe.
Okay, that's
And
beautiful. And thank you for mentioning him because I yes, did he have people have asked me what I thought about him. Does he have everything right? Well, no, but I think he's pretty darn ahead of his time. I mean, he's got a whole library of and a foundation. I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, I think there's more right that rings true to me than not.
Tamara, between all of my experiences, and of course, I started I'm studying metaphysics, studying mystical Christianity.
Hmm.
People try to define me, and again, labels I don't feel
Mm,
are accurate or
they're not
appropriate.
good.
But if I have to have one, I'm a mystical Christian Buddhist yogi. Okay, and having traveled to India to study with mystic teachers there, and then coming back and being intimately involved in the hospice movement as it has grown from a small nonprofit private business to a universal way of caring for the dying.
Yes.
There are teachers in every form and shape, many who've had profound mystical experiences, who come back to share that message. And be it Baha'u'llah, who tried to bring the message of Muhammad to I've the Sikh teachers, the Adi Granth and the Bhagavad Gita. All of these teachings have helped me understand that yes, this is another way to hold on to the wisdom of the Spirit. And I think of it as we are each giving a teaching, much like beggars have a bowl to go out and catch the gifts of heaven. And whether that is a Christian chalice or a Buddhist begging bowl or a Zen uh, crystal goblet, still the love of God will fill our minds and hearts when we practice being still and allowing wisdom to come into our hearts and minds. As people ask me, boy, I wish I could have an NDE like that. And I say, please don't wish that. I don't
Yeah.
want you to have.
Yeah.
You don't want that pain and suffering because there are many teachers now that teach the true art of dying daily. As we believe, so we receive. So let's choose the right ones. Believe in, and I'm here to testify everywhere I've looked, God is a loving, nurturing mother, father, creator, godfather, grandfather, and
Yes.
usher, servant as well as provider when we can be still. And learning to die daily is that practice of meditation.
And surrender.
Meditation is not what you think. Thinking gets in the way of experiencing meditation. And that's where I found, and we have mantras or prayers and ways that we can learn to be still and know, to pay attention to the experience between thoughts. Now, I'm told I have a gifted mind and I'm able to capture a lot of trivia. And yes, I can quote and recite a lot of stuff, but that doesn't mean I'm any different than you or anyone else. It's just I happen to have that handicap. Be careful, don't worship a mind because that can become your prison.
Oh, wow. That's funny. Well, it's interesting because meditation, in my understanding, is opposite of this world because it's telling you to not have any thoughts at all, to exist with no thoughts, everything out and be an open vessel and receive. And that's opposite of the world. But to me, there's some people are afraid of that quiet. I love it. I love the quiet. And I think the other thing is so many people might have been taught or have a misunderstanding when you're in that silence that you can receive. Sometimes it's just sometimes just as peace, and sometimes there's messages, and they may be simple ones. It could be calm down or enjoy life. So I got a question. Did you ever pass that message that your granddaddy said to your daddy, and what did he say? Because you said he was very analytical.
Well, it, it was later in his life when he finally said, "You know, son, I'm sorry I was so hard on you." This takes me back to a time I had been called by family to come back from my life in California because I had wrapped up everything and gone to California after that last operation on the operating table and moved into a commune and became a late blooming hippie, if you would,
Oh my
and,
God.
took
Okay.
on learning and became a yoga teacher and in all kinds of different travels. But I was called to come back home to help mother care for dad through his dying days with cancer.
Okay, got it.
And he did grab me one day as I had helped him back and tucked him in bed. As he grabbed my arm and he looked me in the eyes and he said, "Son, I'm so sorry I've been so hard on you and given you uh, a hard time. You've done the right thing." And it was like, oh, thank you, Lord, the chance. And that illustrates, I guess, the gift of learning to let go of our attitudes and follow God's guidance. It's in serving others that we find fulfillment rather than serving self.
Yes, I'm finding that out. Even just doing this channel, I did this to be of service, but it's me that's gotten so much back.
Well,
I don't know.
I have talked, and I'd like your followers to understand that I've issued an adoption paper to bring you in as our granddaughter.
Oh, I said I accept.
You're my spirit child of great appreciation.
Oh, I feel the same way. I just love you and Cheryl so much. I mean, you're incredibly special. And I know we're all special, but um I I love the fact that you are so fully you and that you embrace. I mean, I don't like labels either. And Jesus has told me, don't label yourself and don't label others because it limits
Mhm.
your growth spiritually because we've been so many things, so many things. But that why can't you be? Look, I just found out in March I'm a star seed. I didn't even know what that word was. I had no clue about anything. And now I'm like if you had to put a label, a Christian mystic star seed, I don't know. I'm just adding dust as well as other stuff. So you have to laugh a little bit about this stuff. I mean, we don't want this world or people in it, no one, to label who we are because we want to continue to grow, expand, and it's okay to be in a place we don't know.
Mhm.
So tell us, gosh, so much there, and I know you're going to be coming back on with your partner, Dr. Cheryl Macon, and we're going to, have this live chat. It's going to be a hoot, and there's so much wisdom you can pass on. Of course, you're both welcome here anytime. But just at the top of your head, what are there's people are trouble. There's all these things going on around the world. I don't need to label the things of this world today. What are some things that you could pass along that might give some peace and understanding to people watching?
Hmm. I recognize that we are on this planet experiencing a profound and universal transformation.
Wow. Amen.
Transformation is taking place, and I use an analogy. If you know the story of a butterfly, starts out as a caterpillar, and that caterpillar lives a whole lifespan hanging on to things and consuming and being a caterpillar. But it reaches a point where it has to be still, go within, let go, and even dissolve all of the structures, attachments, and concepts and forms, to let go and be still so that it can emerge out of that ground, land based being through the cocoon stage into a magnificent butterfly traversing you know, the planet, bringing juicy pollen, if you would, or connection around the planet. we as a species are having to go through that same form of transformation. And the greatest tool we can use in managing that is that meditation, to die daily. My mystic teacher in India, for those who follow the Radha Swami teachings, Surat Shabad Yoga, or on the web you could do sos.org, Science of the Soul, sos.org.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay.
The, the message there has been you tithe daily. 10% of a 24-hour period turns out to be 2.5 hours a day. And in the ashrams in India, it was 2.5 hours of sitting in stillness. That takes discipline and management. I continue my daily meditation. I'm not able to do that intense, but when I have the time or when I get the opportunity, like we did with Cheryl and I, working for a company that said, we need you to take a break and come back in 2 months. We left the job in Colorado that we were doing and spent that time, I was corrected, 3 months. We spent that time on staff at a yoga camp in the Bahamas, where I had been decades earlier getting my certification as a yoga teacher. And in that environment, it was the opportunity to wake, to practice stillness and quiet, then go out and serve the community on a daily basis. And that's my, I guess, highest form of living, is to be able to serve where I'm needed.
Well, you're serving right now. You're
Say
serving
again?
right now. You're serving right now with people listening and giving of your time. And I think that when we're vulnerable to our true selves, it's not easy, because we've been taught, don't be your true self. People might not like that, but it's refreshing. And whatever that is, just be you. I'll be me and you be you, and it's all good. But the fact that you're so vulnerable and just present, most people, have you ever noticed that just being present, listening, being there, not thinking about what's on your to-do list, but just being present, it's important. It's important that we hear one another, whether we agree or disagree, but be there and love and just be present for others and be of service like you are today. And also, you're very active still in the end of life care. As far as what you're doing with that, you just finished a funeral. You're a funeral director. You just finished that as well. So you're very involved with still all of this. I know that you're somewhat retired, but you'll never fully be, because you're always helping. Below I'll put the email. So if someone wants to get a hold of you, and you said that you would kindly welcome anyone that had questions about end of life care. It could be anything that would come up, because you've seen so many things and you understand that transition between life and passing over to the other side, and this also the body and just the family and all the different nuances to that. And you've been through a lot yourself, and also personally. And here, the big thing is there's no death. That's the good news. But still, there are, I guess, honorable ways that you want to respect your family and friends when it comes to these kind of things. So, Brother Ed, you're wonderful. I just thank you from the bottom of my heart being here today. And I look forward to seeing both you and your partner, Dr. Cheryl Macon, to be on here and to have the live chat. Because goodness, I don't know where we're going to go with this, because both of you are you're firecrackers, both of you. So thank you so much. Thank you.
As we know, thoughts become things. So let's choose the good ones. With that said, I request permission to go ashore, my dear.
Absolutely. I salute you for being a servant of the Most High. God bless you. Thank you so much, Brother Ed.
The force is with us.
It is.
Bye.
Bye.